Hey folks, and welcome once again to the Red Shirt Report. This is episode 3, brought to you by StackUp.org, where veterans are our mission and gaming is our passion. My name is Chris Clue Miller.
And I'm Chris the Game Case, also known as Cuddles. I think the first thing we're going to talk about tonight is some of those meeting recaps from our boardroom meeting tonight. The first thing that I'd like to dive into is our PAX West air assaults. We have 4 veterans that will be coming out to PAX West. If you're unfamiliar with this program, the air assault program, quite honestly, may be my favorite thing that we do. We take wounded and worthy veterans on an all-expense VIP red carpet experience to these conventions. They don't have to wait in lines. They get to meet all the people that they want to. If they say that they want to play a game, Dave Kraus, our veteran coordinator, looks at them and goes, all right, let's do it. And a few minutes later, they're generally sitting down playing that game. They get to go to the parties, they get to meet the people, and it's zero cost to them. It's an absolutely once-in-a-lifetime experience, and I'm very excited to meet the 4 vets that we'll have out at PAX West. Clue?
So Dauntless, the Founders Alpha began August 18th. So that is, for those of you who are lucky enough to get into that, you get a little bit of a precursor view into Dauntless pre-beta. So that's been going on for a couple days now, about less than a week. Interestingly, in that Founders Alpha, with the work that StackUp and Phoenix Labs have been doing with one another, one of the cool things that was put into the game was a StackUp emote, basically like a flare. So in this game, you're battling monsters. For those of you who are unaware of what Dauntless is, you are a slayer going out onto the world's various little floating islands and battling giant monsters. It's a big co-op, basically boss fight game. Very fun, and one of the mechanics is a flare that you can use to signal your team when one of them has found the boss. And so the flares typically are in-game logos and things like that. Well, Phoenix Labs put in a StackUp.org firework in this flare, specifically for us. So that is a really cool thing.
Oh yeah, I may or may not be spamming that everywhere I go. Like any chance that I get, I'm just like, oh, ooh, ah. It's so pretty. So I have another thing that we're really looking forward to at PAX West, and that is on Thursday night, we're going to have a StackUp.org meetup at Postdoc Brewing Company. This is going to be hosted by our Seattle Stack, which is one of our programs that focuses on helping in the local community. And the Postdoc Brewing Company in Redmond, Washington, actually brewed a StackUp beer, which I don't know. I know most of you probably have never met me, but I will summarize in saying that I am very excited to try out a StackUp branded beer. This should be a wonderful experience for both the staff and the air assaults that are going to be there as well. So thank you to the Seattle Stack for organizing that, and keep an eye over on StackUp.org and watch us on Twitter because I'm sure there'll be updates.
Good deal. And so we'll go ahead and roll right into our articles and our talking points for tonight with regards to the game-related stuffs. And for those of you who are at all aware of what's going on in the next week, PAX West is coming to a Seattle near you. It is from September 1st through 4th. It is also on Labor Day weekend. So there's quite a few really interesting debuts that are coming out that I'm looking forward to. So we'll go right into some of the PS4 titles that you can expect to see if you happen to have the opportunity to visit PAX West. Uncharted: The Lost Legacy is coming. They're going to have some exclusives there at PAX West. For those of you who are into the Uncharted franchise, there's also an interesting one called Burly Men at Sea. which I have no idea what the game is, but just by virtue of the title, it sounds absolutely awesome. Gran Turismo Sport, they have both regular and VR modes will be on display there at PAX West. And they have a couple other VR titles. There seems to be a lot more VR titles coming out, which is a good thing for those of us who are looking to justify buying any sort of a VR headset, whether that be Oculus Rift or PSVR or what have you. Bravo Team, which is a VR co-op game, which some of our aerosols had an opportunity to play at E3 this year, which is a co-op VR shooter game. Very fun game. The Impatient and Kaiju Driving Range, there's quite a few VR titles that seem to be coming out, and hopefully you all will have an opportunity to strap on these headsets and delve into worlds unknown. In addition, PAX West has an area called the Indie Mega Booth. Not everyone that goes to PAX, all game developers, are big name studios. So they have a huge support program called the Indie Mega Booth, where they display and allow independent developers to showcase their games. So quite a few games that are going to be on display. There's a couple that struck me just kind of looking at some of the previews. One of them was called Stifled by Gatai Games, and it's like a first-person game. But it reminds me of the old Star Wars arcade game. For those of you who've ever played it, it's just all kind of vector line graphics, very old school sort of thing, but it's from a first-person perspective, and you're maneuvering in a three-dimensional world. So it has a really unique sort of look and feel to it. It's very minimalistic, but at the same time, very stylized. Let's see, what else we have? We've got Thimbleweed Park by Terrible Toy Box Incorporated, which looks it looks kind of like a King's Quest, Police Quest, sort of high-res, 8-bit investigation game. Looks kind of cartoony, but it looks like one of those games that you could really get involved in. And kind of really have to look at your surroundings and kind of be cognizant of things that you pick up, little puzzles and things like that. Very cool game. Return of the Obra Dinn, which is by 3909 LLC, which is another sort of game similar to Stifled, which is it's like black and white shaded, cartoony, first-person or third-person shooter. You don't get a whole lot of information, just these kind of little snippets, little tidbits from the Indie Mega Booth promo video. But there seems to be quite a few there's actually some trading card games, lots of like Castlevania side-scrollers, lots of retro gaming, maybe a few VR titles in there. But it seems like there's a big retro presence once again. I don't know about you, Cuddles, but it seems like that kind of is being I don't know what in particular you look forward to at PAX West. I particularly really enjoy going to the Indie Mega Booth and just kind of seeing what these folks are doing, because it seems like a lot of what they want to do is spring out, right? They want to make themselves. They want to. What's the word I'm looking for? They want to make themselves not quite, they want to make themselves unique.
Oh yeah, it's some of the innovation in just new gameplay mechanics that you see coming out of the indie games. I find incredibly compelling. I know Race for the Galaxy, which is a TCG by Temple Gates Games, is something I'm really looking forward to. And then 9 Parchments from Frozen Bites. And then Castle Story from Sauropod Studios. All of them are kind of unique. Without explaining any of them, look those games up. Go check them out. I know I'm going to be visiting them at the Indie Mega Booth. And then outside of the indie games, what am I looking forward to at PAX West? You know I'm going to hang out at Blizzard. And Go talk to those guys, see what's going on with Overwatch. We had some huge Gamescom announcements, and then I'll also Dauntless. I just want to go give the guys from Dauntless a hug. Like I'm gonna play their game. I don't need to ask any questions. I just want to give them a hug because that flare in Dauntless. I know we already talked about it, but it was awesome.
They're has been extra. We've had they've given us a lot of love with regards to our aerosol guys too.
Oh yeah. Dauntless has done a phenomenal job of being a very good friend to StackUp.org. So thank you for that, Dauntless. So the next thing that I think we can move on into is the Bungie Studios. Luke Smith is going to be doing a PAX West keynote entitled Storytime with Luke Smith. So I'm super excited about this. Luke Smith, if you don't know him, he is the director of Destiny 2. And for him to be doing the keynote, one, it shows just how serious Bungie is about Destiny 2, which there probably wasn't much doubt about that. But having it be story time, I'm very interested because one of the big complaints about Destiny 1 that I believe Bungie has even admitted was justified was that there wasn't as much of a story. People wanted more story. They wanted to dive more into their game. And what greater compliment to a developer than to have people say, we want more of what you gave us. I think that's kind of shows Destiny fans' dedication to that game. So to have this keynote entitled Story Time, I'm really excited to hopefully be hearing more about the story in Destiny 2. Now, Sketch, what do you think? Do you think we're going to see a more story-focused Destiny 2? Does it even matter? Is Destiny just PvP and raiding, and who cares about the story? What are your thoughts on the matter?
I'm assuming you're talking to Chris, not Sketch, because
Clue.
You said Sketch. Oh man, I'm to live in the Sketchman's shadow. It's difficult. I think that I'm looking forward to it. I think that the story, for me, story is, if not as important, more important, or than anything else about the game. So, for instance, you can have a game that has poor game design, crappy graphics, but if the story is compelling and you really care, if it sucks you into a point where you give a crap about what it is that you're doing, who's involved in the game, a lot of you can kind of overlook some of the shortcomings of the game itself. But to have somebody like Luke in just kind of sharing his expertise and his experience, there's really a lot of value in that sort of thing, not only to veteran gamers, but also to anybody who's ever been interested in kind of the behind the scenes things. I imagine he'll go into, talk about, the challenges and of what it is that he does and just game development in general. And there's a lot of information, a lot of experience, and a lot of expertise, and just a lot of passion, because you don't stay in a game industry this long if you don't have passion for what it is that you're doing. So I always, anytime I have an opportunity to sit down and listen to people in the industry who have a pedigree like Luke, it's never a wasted experience, ever.
Right on. And I'm sure you can go over to the PAX website and see how you can watch that keynote live. There will be there's a full lineup of their panels over on the PAX West 2017 website, and you can enjoy many of the panels live on Twitch TV.
Good stuff. So let's move on to our last little tidbit, and this is kind of a little bit of a different story than we've done, but very pertinent. This has to do with the military using augmented reality to train. So the military has an institute called the Synthetic Training Environment, or rather a training environment called the Synthetic Training Environment, which essentially is a VR training suite for soldiers. There's quite a few institutes that go into the Army Research Laboratory, University of San Diego, University of Southern California Institute for Creative Technologies, Executive Office for Simulation Training. There's a lot of big industry folks who are trying to leverage VR and augmented reality into combat operations and just military training in general. This isn't a new thing, but it seems to me like the technology and the mechanisms by which they can deploy these sorts of technologies and the training value that they bring is just getting bigger and better and just more robust. As kind of anecdotally, and actually kind of going back, I don't know if anybody else out there remembers America's Army. That was a video game put out by the U.S. Army, and it was kind of like their Arma-esque sort of game. But I remember there was a big push there were big promotions for that. But when I was in the military, and this was 96 to 2000, we were doing stuff like this already. Now, the great thing about VR and having like the personal VR sets is you have a lot more opportunity to do squad-based training, individual training. The simulators that I used were vehicle-based. So you'd get into essentially a box that looked sort of like the interior of, in my case, it was an M2 Bradley. And you'd go out on maneuvers. And there's a huge amount of training benefit to doing this. But of course, with graphics and just kind of the technology, the hardware that's available today, and the strides that they've made in those regards, it seems to me like this is a really great way to immerse the soldier, to train the soldier, and to get the soldier, your war fighters, in that mindset without subjecting them to harm. What are your thoughts on this, Cuddles? This whole idea of VR training with the military?
So I was able to this weekend actually in Orlando at an event called Orlando IX. I was able to try out a product from Microsoft called the HoloLens. Which is an augmented reality device. It's a complete Windows 10 PC, and basically what's a headband with some lenses. Really, really neat piece of tech. And one of the things that they showed us was a jet aircraft engine. And you're looking down at it, and you can actually reach up and pull parts off, pull them closer to you, rotate them, look at them, and then actually see how everything's connected and how the engine runs on various different levels. The training aspect of that, just for that one small application of jet engine building, makes so much sense. And for it to be used for military training, that's a no-brainer. If the tech is there, we should be using it. We actually had a member of the local Orlando stack who is a law enforcement officer, a former military, former Army guy that is now a police officer. And he was talking about how they had been shown AR technology for like, I guess, incursions into a building. So you're going into a building to perform an objective, and as you're looking around, superimposed on the walls is the blueprints, so you know what the room on the other side of the wall looks like. You could look all the way to the left in that instance and see a full bank of CCTVs of all the video coverage. I think both the real time and the training, obviously we're much more capable of using these this technology for training at the moment, but I think we're a hop, skip, and a very short jump away from seeing real-time possible combat applications for equipment such as this.
Agreed. The I guess the applications are really limitless, right?
Indeed.
There was a thing I saw with Conan O'Brien, and I guess he was at Google's lab, or he was at Twitch's lab, or he was at a VR lab essentially, and he was doing Conan O'Brien things, and it was pretty funny. But yeah, just the idea that, so using it for an engineering perspective makes a lot of sense. If you need to diagnose a problem, or if there's a structural something structural that you need to assess or kind of think about. But I guess the one limitation with regard to dismounted VR is the fact that you can't really decouple them without putting them in a place where, like, there's a limitation. So if they're in a building that, let's say there's multiple stairs in the building, or like multiple levels, you would have to have almost like a physical representation of the building in order for them to maneuver in it. And I have actually seen things like that in the civilian sector where they have like first-person shooter sorts of things, where basically what they do is they set up like a cubicle farm, but it's a maze. And so you have a physical walls and barriers, but it mirrors the map that you're playing in. But it seems like you would have to do something very similar to do anything really significant with regards to dismounts. And again, it would be limited to buildings, like interiors and things. You couldn't go out, you couldn't have them train excuse me, in a field, or so there are limitations to it, at least now, technological limitations.
Oh yeah, and I think those are, as we see the need for, the first time a general with several stars on his shoulder looks at Microsoft and says, I need this to work in the field. There's a government contract behind those words. We'll see it happen. I think we're really at the point with technology of this nature where it's only a use case needs to be discovered, and then the technology can. It's not a matter of can we, it's a matter of when are we going to. Right.
Yeah, no doubt. I remember, just kind of to throw out another little anecdote, we were doing some training at Fort Benning, as a matter of fact, and it was really fun because there was this simulator. It was a Humvee simulator, and you sat in a Humvee, and they had the screen projected on the glass. And I remember, and we were training against Soviet doctrine, Soviet tactics, where they send rifle brigade after rifle brigade after rifle brigade, and it was the 101st Airborne versus like the Soviets' 16th frickin' armored brigade, right? And so basically what you have is artillery and air and scouts, and that's it. And I remember there was this thing where the Humvee would drive, the driver would drive as fast as he could towards the forest. And the forest was like this artificial wall. And if you hit it fast enough, the physics, they didn't have like the bullet through paper physics down. And so he would penetrate the wall and pop up on top of the woods, basically. And he could drive around and scout things out without getting shot by the enemy. And they had like Apaches flying around, and they didn't have graphics for the missiles, so they were using like giant beach balls. It was really kind of funny, but that was the infancy of that technology. But even then, I mean, this was pre-2000. The value of doing things like this was evident. So moving on, the last Red Shirt Raider report we had an Ask a Vet question. And the Ask a Vet question was essentially, do you think that, is it okay for civilians to wear vet style or grunt style gear? So things like, or apparel. So things like t-shirts, maybe, pants that might have little, military-esque style sayings or patches or that sort of thing. Not uniforms, just clothing, clothing apparel. And a lot of you have voiced, since that episode, have given their voices to that vote. So far, it's 61% of 46 votes to okay and 39% of 30 votes to no. So originally, it was almost half and half. It was skewed slightly towards, yeah, it's okay for civilians to wear this apparel. But there was a significant and a not insignificant number of negatives to that. And that was very surprising to me as a vet. So that post is still up, that vote. So I think at some point, probably not next week, we're going to be at PAX. So we're not going to be having a Red Shirt Raider report next week. We should still have the boardroom meeting. So if you try to make that at least, and then you'll kind of get an idea of what's going on in terms of Stack Up. But I think the week after that, we're going to have another Ask a Vet question. And we would like to put it out to you, our loyal viewing audience. If you have a question that you think that you would like to pose to a vet or just want a veteran's perspective on, please let us know. And we'll get some of those and we'll ask a vet. What else do we got going on here?
Well, we got PAX West coming up. I know we touched on it at the top of the show. There's going to be air assaults. We're going to have all sorts of social media coverage. You are not going to want to miss out on the things that we're doing there. Make sure you're following Stack Up on Twitter at stackup.org, all of that spelled out. And you'll see some really cool stuff. And while you're waiting, you can go over to our YouTube channel, which will be linked under this video that will be on YouTube, so there's no reason for a link. But go over to our YouTube channel, watch some of the videos from like PAX South and PAX West and San Diego Comic-Con, some of the air assaults that we've done before, if you want to get an idea of what that program really is.
Definitely. And if you're interested in playing and participating with some of our folks, we encourage you to join the Red Shirt Raiders, which is the stackup.org gaming group. So these are vets and civilians getting together, playing games together, and just having a good time. Right now, I think they're playing Dauntless. They might actually be over in the... I don't know if anybody else is streaming it. There might be some other streamers that are streaming some Dauntless. So if you're interested in knowing what it is, take a look for that. And if you're interested in joining the Red Shirt Raiders, check us out on stackup.org. That's stack-up.org. And ask for some information. We'll definitely get that out to you. So until next time, we encourage you to have fun, get some gaming on, and we'll talk to you after PAX.
See you next time.